The morning Vincent Hale collapsed was as ordinary as any other in his ruthless schedule. He sat behind the glass wall of his corner office, the skyline of Chicago still gray and blurred by sleet. His fingers hovered over his keyboard, firing out decisions with surgical precision. He hadn't slept well in weeks, but that was irrelevant. Hale and Rowe thrived on his intensity, his uncanny foresight, his refusal to waver. Employees feared him. Investors admired him. No one got close. Except her. But that was months ago now, and he'd made sure she understood where they stood. Nora Linden had been assigned to care for his father when the older man was hospitalized last winter. She wasn't flashy like the women Vincent briefly entertained. She was steady, quietly humorous, with a strength that didn't demand attention. His father adored her, and though Vincent never acknowledged it aloud, he had started arriving earlier, lingering longer at the hospital, not because he feared for his father's health, but because Nora made the sterile white walls feel warmer. He had once asked her to dinner, then at the last minute canceled, no explanation. She hadn't pursued it, just gave him that look, compassionate, with a flicker of disappointment she quickly buried. After that, she stayed professional, distant. And then she transferred to a different ward, and he told himself it didn't matter. Now Vincent felt a sharp pain beneath his ribcage, tight and unforgiving. He blinked at the screen, numbers splitting into meaningless fragments. His vision tunneled, the office spun. He tried to stand to call someone, but his knees gave way. He fainted before his assistant even knocked. The hospital reeked of antiseptic, too clean to be real. When Vincent stirred awake, the first sensation was pain, an electric throb in his temple and a heaviness in his chest he didn't understand. "You're lucky you didn't collapse while driving," said a soft voice. His eyes fluttered open. For a second he thought he was hallucinating. Nora stood by his bedside, clipboard in hand, her uniform crisp, her expression unreadable. "Nora," he rasped, voice rough with disuse. Her eyes flicked to his face. "Mr. Hale, welcome back." He tried to sit up. She pressed a hand to his shoulder gently, firmly. "Don't you need rest? You were severely dehydrated, your blood pressure bottomed out, and there's concern about your heart rhythm. Your body been giving you warnings. You ignored everyone." He exhaled slowly. "I'm fine." "You're not," she said, not unkindly. He watched her a moment. "What are you doing here?" "I transferred back to cardiology 3 weeks ago. Rotations. I didn't know it was you until I read the chart." Her voice was calm, cool. She moved to the foot of the bed, checking monitors. He hated how exposed he felt, shirtless under thin hospital sheets with dark circles under his eyes, IV tubes like chains. "I want another nurse." She looked at him then. "I already requested the transfer." Something in his chest clenched, not pain, not exactly. Regret maybe, but it lodged behind his ribs and stayed there. "Nora, wait." She stopped at the door. He swallowed, his voice dropped. "I don't want anyone else." She didn't turn around, but after a pause, she walked back in. 3 days passed. He wasn't an easy patient. He hated needing help. Hated the way his body betrayed him, how simple things, showering, even standing, left him winded. But Nora was constant. She administered meds with quiet efficiency, checked vitals, adjusted the pillows when he refused to ask. Her touch was never too much, but it lingered a moment longer than necessary when she thought he was asleep. One evening he watched her sit by the window with a chart, her pen tapping against the clipboard rhythmically. The room was dark, save for the orange glow of city lights. "You always work this late?" he asked. She glanced over. "Sometimes, depends on the patient." "Just me, then." A faint smile. "You're a lot of work." His lips quirked. "So I've been told." She rose, walked to his bedside. "Try sleeping. The sedative should be wearing off. If the pain returns, call me." "Nora." She hesitated. "Why did you say yes when I asked you to dinner?" The question hung between them like smoke. Her voice was steady. "Because I thought I saw something in you, something kind, something real, but I was wrong." He stared at her. "You were." She didn't reply. After she left, he lay in the dark, heart slow and uneven, haunted more by her absence than the silence. The following morning he woke gasping, drenched in sweat. Nurses rushed in, adjusting oxygen, calling out vitals. Panic flared until he saw her. Nora pushing through the door, eyes already scanning the monitors. "I'm here," she said, gripping his hand without hesitation. He held onto that grip like a lifeline. When he stabilized, she sat beside him, hand still in his. He watched her, face pale with worry. "I thought you said you requested a transfer." "I did," she whispered. "They denied it, short-staffed." "You could have fought harder." "I did." He closed his eyes. "I'm glad they didn't approve it." She didn't let go of his hand. Later that night, as Rain tapped the window, she brought him soup from the cafeteria. He took a spoonful, grimaced. This tastes like salt water and despair. She laughed, soft, real. That's hospital cuisine for you. He studied her, something unspoken pulling at the edges of his voice. Nora, if I hadn't fainted, would you have ever talked to me again? Her eyes softened. I would have forgiven you, eventually, but I don't think I would have let myself care again. He nodded slowly. Do you now? She didn't answer right away, but her hand covered his once more, warm and steady. I'm trying not to, she said, but you make it hard. Vincent turned his palm up and laced their fingers together. I won't walk away this time, he said. And for once, he meant it. Vincent's discharge papers came with a list of medications, dietary changes, and a stern warning from the cardiologist. But what echoed loudest was Nora's voice the night before, quiet, reluctant, but honest. I'm trying not to, but you make it hard. He had never wanted to be the kind of man who needed someone. But here he was, standing just outside the hospital entrance with wind clawing through his coat, turning back once, just to see if she was watching. She was. The penthouse felt colder than he remembered. Everything was in place, immaculate floors, curated artwork, glass walls framing the skyline, but it was too still. There was no beeping monitor, no gentle shuffle of footsteps in the hallway, no faint scent of lavender hand cream that lingered after she left the room. He wasn't used to silence, not this kind. In the days that followed, Vincent tried to dive back into work. Emails, mergers, forecasts, but focus came in stuttering starts and everything felt strangely muted. He canceled 2 meetings after his vision blurred again. He started drinking more water, kept his sodium low, took the pills, even the bitter ones. He followed the protocol like it was a deal contract, because if his body failed again, he didn't know if she'd be there. Then one afternoon, his assistant knocked on the glass door. There's someone from St. Jude's downstairs, she said. They're dropping off the patient transition kit. Send them up, Vincent replied too quickly. He adjusted his cuffs, smoothed his tie, and stood. But it was Nora. The nurse who stepped into his office was polite, informative, and painfully impersonal. She walked him through the at-home recovery process and the cardiologist's follow-up schedule. As she packed up her tablet, she added casually, Nora mentioned you might need help adjusting. She said you wouldn't ask, but you'd pretend everything was fine until it was. His pulse stuttered, and, well, she said that. She cares, the nurse said simply. She doesn't let herself do that often. When she left, Vincent stood by the window for a long time. The city pulsed below, urgent and unfeeling, but something inside him softened. He picked up his phone. No text. No call. He typed, I'd like to see you. Then deleted it. And instead, he went back to St. Jude. The nurse at the front desk gave him a strange look when he asked for Nora. She's not on shift today, she said. She took some leave. Is she all right? I think she's just tired. Burnout hits hard. He left the hospital with a weight in his chest heavier than any diagnosis. That night he didn't sleep. He kept thinking of her hands, how they steadied him without hesitation, how they lingered when he needed it most, and how he never once asked if she was all right. He had spent years building walls so high no one could reach him, and she had tried once gently to climb them. He'd closed the door. Now he stood outside hers. It was a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place someone chose for peace rather than prestige. He hesitated at the buzzer, heart hammering harder than it had even in the ambulance. When she opened the door, she looked startled. Nora, he said. She didn't speak at first, just looked at him, as if trying to decide whether this was real or a mistake. What are you doing here? She asked finally. I didn't know where else to go. That disarmed her slightly. She stepped back. You want to come in? He nodded, stepping into a space that smelled like coffee and cedar. It felt lived in, soft. There was a blanket draped over the back of the couch, a half-finished book on the table. He sat, awkward in his expensive coat. She didn't sit. I thought you were better, she said. I am's medically. She waited. I've been thinking about what you said, that I make it hard, and you were right, I do, because I've spent my entire life believing that needing someone made me weaker. But you didn't ask me to need you, you just showed up. She folded her arms, a shield more than a gesture. Vincent. I don't want to do this halfway. I don't want to pretend you didn't matter, that I didn't care. I did, I do. For a long time, the only sound was the faint hum of traffic outside. Then she moved slowly to sit beside him. I took time off because I was scared, she admitted. I've seen men like you collapse and recover and go right back to forgetting they were ever fragile. I couldn't be another chapter in your recovery. I couldn't be convenient. He reached for her hand. You're not convenient, you're essential. She closed her eyes. Then show me, she said, not in grand gestures, not in promises, just show up. He nodded. I will. The next few weeks weren't magic. There were awkward pauses and days he wanted to say something and didn't. Nora didn't let him off easy. She called him out when he was too short on the phone, when he skipped a meal, when he brushed off the dizziness that came back after a particularly long board meeting. But he showed up. He brought her coffee on her shift breaks and waited outside when she needed quiet. He asked about her day before talking about his. He listened, truly listened, when she told him stories about patience, about how grief shaped her, how sometimes the only thing keeping a person going was a stranger who didn't flinch. And she softened little by little. The walls between them didn't crash down, they were dismantled brick by careful brick. One Sunday morning he cooked her breakfast. It was terrible, the eggs were rubbery, the toast burned. But when she laughed and leaned against him, he felt like he'd won something greater than any business deal. He didn't need to conquer this. He just needed to be present. And for the first time in his life, that was enough. It rained the night Vincent met Nora's father. He hadn't planned to, it just happened that way, an unexpected invitation after a long day, the kind where conversation came easier than solitude. She had mentioned her father was in town, staying in a guest house nearby while recovering from minor surgery, and before he could overthink it, she said, "Come with me." He followed without question. The guest house was modest, cluttered in the way a lived-in place gathers comfort over years. Photographs lined the mantel, Nora as a child with her knees scraped and grinning wide, her mother's laugh frozen in a frame, now faded. Her father, tall and silver-haired, sat in an armchair with a blanket across his lap and sharpness in his eyes that age hadn't softened. "This is the one then?" her father asked as Vincent stepped in. Nora gave a small smile, the kind that curved but didn't rise all the way to her eyes. "This is Vincent." The older man gestured toward the seat beside him. "Well, sit, I've got questions and I don't like to waste time." It was oddly familiar, that tone. Vincent sat. "What do you do?" "I run Hale and Rowe," Vincent answered evenly. "So you're the suit," the man muttered, nodding. "The one who made my daughter come home crying 2 winters ago." Nora stiffened. Vincent didn't flinch. "I did," he said, "and I've regretted it ever since." That seemed to satisfy the man more than any apology might have. Later, after they'd left and were walking back under one umbrella, Nora said quietly, "I didn't know he'd bring that up." "I'm glad he did." "Why?" "Because I needed to hear it out loud, from someone who loves you." She looked at him then, and in her silence was a kind of gratitude that needed no language. Vincent wasn't used to healing being slow. He expected setbacks in business but personal life. He had always operated under the illusion that emotions could be managed the way markets were strategically on paper. But there were nights he still woke up breathless, heart racing. Some days the fatigue returned without warning, dragging behind him like a shadow. Nora noticed. She didn't hover, but she saw. She always did. One morning she brought him a small paper bag as he waited for her outside her building. Inside was a knitted gray beanie and a thermos of green tea. "It's cold," she said simply. He blinked down at the items. "Did you knit this?" "I don't know how to knit," she said, smiling, "but my neighbor does. I asked her for a favor." He touched the softness of the wool, throat tightening. "Thank you." "Don't thank me, just wear it." She reached out and tugged it over his head, her hands careful, the way she'd once adjusted his oxygen mask. Only this time her touch lingered, fingers brushing his jaw. "You look less like a CEO now," she said, half teasing. "Good," he said. "I'd rather be someone who deserves you." She looked away, but not before he saw her blush. As winter gave way to a brittle kind of spring, things shifted quietly between them. She let him keep a drawer at her place. He stocked it with a change of clothes and the kind of tea she drank when she couldn't sleep. He began cooking, not well but earnestly, and she never laughed, even when the pasta stuck together or the sauce burned. She showed him her favorite walking route by the lake, the one she took after night shifts when she couldn't unwind. They walked it together in silence, sometimes holding hands, sometimes not. And one night, without warning, she cried. He found her curled on her couch, her scrubs still on, shoes kicked off, arms folded tightly around her stomach. She wasn't sobbing, just silent, with tears slipping down her face like something she didn't notice. He knelt beside her, brushing a damp curl from her cheek. What happened? Just lost a patient, she whispered. A young girl, we did everything, it wasn't enough. He didn't speak, he didn't try to fix it. He just sat there holding her until her hands unclenched and she leaned into him. Every time it happens, she said quietly, I wonder how much more of this I can carry. You're not carrying it alone, he said, not anymore. She nodded against his chest, the motion small, like trust rebuilding itself. One afternoon, as he sat in her kitchen, Nora placed a small white envelope on the table in front of him. It was unmarked. What's this? He asked. Your father, she said. He wrote you something before he passed. I didn't give it to you. I didn't think you were ready. Vincent stared at the envelope, breath caught somewhere behind his ribs. His father had died not long after the collapse, a quiet passing in a hospital room that Vincent had been too late to reach. With trembling fingers, he opened the letter. Vincent, I know you think I didn't notice the weight you carry. But I did. I saw the way you drove yourself, how afraid you were to feel. I was like that once, but life has a way of breaking through, sometimes in the form of people, sometimes pain, often both. If you're reading this, I hope you've let someone in. Let her stay. Love. Dad. He didn't say anything after finishing it. He just sat there, head bowed, and Nora reached for his hand without a word. That night he kissed her in the quiet kitchen light. It wasn't urgent, it wasn't dramatic. It was a thank you and an apology and a beginning. And she kissed him back with the kind of grace that forgave what hadn't been said yet. They didn't speak of love. Not yet. But in the way they lingered in doorways, how they folded into each other after long days, how she slipped her hand into his on the train without looking, it was already there. Steady and growing. Not a fire. A warmth that stayed. The first time Nora saw Vincent truly afraid was not in a hospital bed or under fluorescent lights. It was in the waiting room of a clinic, his thumb pressed hard against his phone screen, the knuckles of his other hand white as he gripped the edge of his seat. His eyes didn't move from the double doors. She had just stepped out from a routine consult with a colleague when she saw him there, rigid, overdressed in a tailored coat, like he'd come straight from a meeting and hadn't meant to stay. But he had, and the fear etched into his posture hadn't left. Oh, Vincent. He looked up, the tension snapping tight as piano wire. She's inside, he said, voice thin. Angela, my sister. Nora blinked. You never told me you had a sister. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. We haven't spoken in a long time, not really since Dad died. She called me last week, said she'd been getting dizzy, chest pain, didn't want to go in alone. Nora nodded, sitting beside him, and you came. Of course I did, he said, almost angry. She's my sister. She didn't push, just took his hand in hers, resting it between them like an offering. He didn't say thank you, didn't have to. His grip tightened slowly, like he remembered how to lean. When Angela finally stepped out, pale but walking, a file clutched to her chest, her eyes found her brother first. She froze for a moment, uncertain. Vincent stood. Their hug was awkward, stiff at first. Then she softened and pressed her forehead to his shoulder, and he closed his eyes. Nora turned away to give them space, but not before Angela whispered, "You came." And Vincent whispered back, "I should have come sooner." Later, they sat on Nora's couch while Vincent updated her in quiet tones. Angela had a heart murmur, not dangerous yet, but worth monitoring. She doesn't trust doctors, he said, not since our mother passed. She trusted you. He didn't answer that, just traced the edge of his coffee mug with a fingertip. She's all I have left, he added, in terms of blood. Nora reached out and touched his knee. You're not alone. He looked at her, then really looked. I know, I think for the first time I know. There were nights Vincent still woke with the weight of dreams that felt too close to truth, not about his health, not about failure. About absence. He dreamed of walking into rooms and finding them empty, Nora gone, her scent vanished, her laughter erased. In those moments, the only thing that calmed him was reaching out to her and finding her still there, breathing softly, warm under his hand. It terrified him how much he needed her. But he didn't hide it anymore. One morning, while she brushed her teeth in his bathroom and he folded laundry, a new skill he'd taken to with single-minded precision, he called out, I have a question. She appeared in the doorway, toothbrush in hand, one eyebrow raised. He held up a pair of her socks. How is it that one always disappears? She smirked. You think I have the answers to life's great mysteries before breakfast. He walked over, slipped the sock into her palm. I think you've got answers to more than you let on. She rinsed her mouth and leaned in, stealing a kiss that tasted of mint. Some mysteries are better unsolved. He let the moment hang there, admiring her, then said softly, not this one. Her smile faltered. Vincent. He hesitated. I think I want you here, not just sometimes, always. She stilled, not out of fear, but something gentler. Wait, maybe, meaning. You're not saying that because you're scared again, are you? She asked. No, he said, I'm saying it because I'm not. They didn't move in together right away. Nora had her life, her rhythm. Her roots ran deep in routine and solitude and the small freedoms of living alone. Vincent understood that now, so they merged their lives slowly, weekends, then 3 nights a week, then the drawer turned into 2, then a quiet talk about where they might want to live together in the spring. When she got called into the hospital late one night, he made her tea and sat awake until she came back, her scrub stained, her hands raw from washing. She didn't talk that night, just undressed in silence and crawled into bed, curling into his side like something fragile. He kissed the crown of her head and didn't ask questions. In the morning, she reached for him before she opened her eyes. That was how they lived now. Not perfectly, not without friction, but with care that had been earned choice by choice. Vincent's doctor cleared him for travel in March. The first thing he did was plan a weekend for them in Vermont, a quiet cabin, snow still clinging to the eaves, a fire already lit when they arrived. They didn't do much. They slept in, read, cooked badly together, took walks down trails that smelled of pine and memory. One morning, Nora stood by the window wrapped in a blanket, her hair pulled into a low, sleepy bun. The sun hit her like a painting, soft and gold. Vincent came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. She leaned into him. You're quiet this morning. He rested his chin on her shoulder, just thinking how glad I am I fainted. She laughed, breath fogging the glass. I mean it, he said. I know, she replied, turning in his arms. I know you do. Spring arrived not with a flourish, but slowly, green creeping back into the world, air warming one breath at a time. Vincent planted herbs on Nora's balcony, basil mostly because she liked the way it smelled on her hands. She brought him coffee at work sometimes. He sent her flowers on days she didn't expect them, with notes that read no reason, just today. They were building something not grand, but solid. It wasn't dramatic. It was real. The morning Vincent proposed didn't start with a plan. He woke to the smell of rain on pavement, the soft thrum of it tapping against the window beside their bed. Nora lay beside him, hair splayed over the pillow, her breathing slow and even. She stirred when he brushed a strand away from her cheek, eyes blinking open. You're staring, she murmured. I know. He didn't say sorry, and she didn't ask for an explanation. They rose slowly, bodies moving in quiet coordination, the rhythm of people who had folded into each other's lives without needing permission anymore. She made oatmeal. He burned the toast. They shared a look over the smoke and laughed the way only people do when there's nothing left to prove. He watched her lean on the counter, spoon in hand, the sleeves of his sweatshirt falling past her wrists. Something in his chest shifted, not with urgency but with certainty, a truth that had waited patiently until he was quiet enough to hear it. I want to marry you, he said. She paused mid-bite. There was no ring, no grand setup, just his voice, rough from sleep and steady with the kind of conviction he once saved for boardrooms. She set her spoon down carefully, as if movement might break the spell. Is this your version of getting down on one knee? She asked, tone light, eyes unreadable. He stood, came around the kitchen island, and knelt right there on the tile floor, barefoot, heartbeat loud in the quiet. This is me asking without conditions, without timing, just truth. You were the first person to see through everything I hid behind, and you stayed. I can't imagine the rest of my life without waking up next to you, burning toast, watching you fall asleep mid-movie, listening to you talk about your patience with that look you don't even know you make. I want all of it, every version of you, forever. Her eyes shimmered with something not quite tears, but close. You didn't even get a ring, she whispered. I didn't need one to know. She knelt too, cupping his face with both hands. Yes, she said softly, of course yes. Then more playfully, but don't think this gets you out of buying a real one. He grinned a deal. They didn't rush the wedding. It was planned gently, like everything else between them. Slow conversations at night, decisions made over tea, hands brushing across pages of venues and simple dresses. They chose a small garden tucked behind a library where Nora used to read as a child. Just close friends, her father, Angela, and a few of Vincent's longtime colleagues who had slowly evolved into something more like family. Nora wore a tea-length dress, soft and unpretentious, her hair pinned with a single white flower. Vincent wore no tie, no cufflinks, just a clean navy suit and the kind of ease that had taken him years to earn. He cried when he saw her walk toward him. Not loudly, not with theatrics, just a single tear sliding silently down his cheek as her eyes found his and didn't look away. They wrote their own vows. Nora spoke of patience, of late nights and quiet mornings, of his laugh when he finally let it out. She said he'd taught her that even the guarded can love deeply, that softness can come from the most unexpected places. Vincent's voice shook when he spoke. He told her she saved him in ways even medicine couldn't, that he used to believe in control, in isolation, in strength without vulnerability, but that she had shown him real strength came in letting someone see you at your weakest and choosing to stay anyway. They kissed before the officiant finished speaking. Laughter rose like sunlight through leaves. Married life didn't change them so much as root them more firmly in each other. There were still hard days. Nora still came home quiet sometimes, carrying grief in her spine. Vincent still had moments where ambition gripped him too tightly and left him breathless with worry. But now they weathered it together. One rainy afternoon, months after the wedding, Vincent came home early. He found Nora curled on their couch, feet tucked beneath her, reading a worn novel she'd already read 5 times. He watched her for a moment before setting his briefcase down. "You're home early," she said, smiling. "Cancelled a meeting, nothing urgent." He slipped beside her, pulling the blanket over both of them. She nestled into him without a word. They sat like that for a long while. And then, without fanfare, Nora closed her book and said quietly, "I'm late." He blinked. "Late?" She nodded. "I took a test." His breath hitched and... She looked at him, eyes wide and unsure and filled with something electric. It was positive. For a long second, neither of them moved. Then his hand found hers, fingers curling slowly around her palm. They didn't say "I'm scared" or "what if" or "are we ready." They just held each other, and in that space, tight and still and trembling with wonder, they became something new again. Years from now, their son will ask how they met. Nora will laugh and tell him it started with a mistake. Vincent will say it started with a miracle. Neither will mention hospital beds or the long, quiet spaces between them in those early days, but they'll share the real parts. That love isn't always loud. Sometimes it arrives in a steady hand during a night you thought you wouldn't survive. Sometimes it waits at your door long after you've told it not to. Sometimes it knits itself from second chances and breakfast and the unglamorous kind of showing up. And sometimes the coldest heart simply needed the right touch to remember how to beat. Forever, after all, doesn't start with a promise. It starts with "I'm here," and it never leaves.